You're making a mistake. Why are you doing this to me? I didn't do anything. I'm innocent.
The sound of the pen tapping on the desk echoed like a cruel reminder. That was the same office where they called me a thief, and now it was mine. The glass windows reflected the New York skyline, and amid the glow of the lights, I saw the reflection of a man who no longer existed. My name is Steve Cole, and one day this company destroyed everything I was. The smell of burnt coffee and the chill of the air conditioning were the same. The power had simply changed hands. 4 years had passed since the day they accused me of fraud. I left that building with the weight of a tarnished name, a ruined reputation, and the certainty that I would never return. But life has a perverse sense of irony, and the financial market even more so. The Harrison Financial Group, once the empire that destroyed me, was on the brink of bankruptcy. And I, now, was the mysterious investor who would save it. As the board awaited my entrance, I took a deep breath. I remembered Robert Harrison's voice, the CEO who fired me. "You're a great employee, Steve. Too bad you chose the wrong side of the story." Those words still burned like acid. Today, he would discover that the wrong side has a memory and capital. The assistant announced, "Gentlemen, the new investor has arrived." I entered the room. Silence fell like a blade. Robert looked at me without recognizing, but he hesitated for a second. That second when instinct screams before reason understands. I sat at the head of the table. His place. "Let's talk numbers," I said, cold. The game had begun. Inside, my heart pounded heavily. I wondered if revenge would still taste sweet. In the reflection of the water glass, I saw the same gaze of the man who once begged for justice. Now, it was the gaze of someone with power. But power, I had learned early, is just another form of prison. When the meeting ended, I remained alone. I touched the company emblem engraved on the desk, symbol of everything I had lost. "I'm back, and you're going to pay." For the first time in years, I smiled for real, the kind of smile born from pain. The next day dawned with the same gray as always. New York seemed like an invisible battlefield, and I, a soldier who returned only to finish the war. Robert entered the room without looking at me directly. The disguise worked. Stubble, darker hair, a slight British accent. I was the foreign investor, Stephen Colebrook, and no one suspected. Emily Harrison, the director of innovation, presented the quarterly report. Robert's daughter, young, articulate, and different. She spoke with conviction, without the arrogance of the others. There was something honest in her eyes, something that disarmed me for an instant. "Mr. Colebrook, do you believe this restructuring can save the company?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "I believe I can save what's still worth saving." She smiled. I looked away. Robert observed everything with the cynicism of someone who believes he controls the world. "With the new investment, we'll have a chance to rebuild our image," he said, unaware of the abyss he was about to fall into. Every word of his was a reminder of the past, every gesture an old wound reopened. As he talked about profits and projections, I thought of the nights I spent planning every detail of my return. There was no rush. Revenge, like wine, requires time and temperature. My plan was simple. Take financial control, unmask the guilty, and watch everything crumble. Slowly. After the meeting, Emily approached. "I hope you don't get scared by the mess. Inheriting my father's legacy is complicated." I smiled with disguised irony. "Every legacy comes with debts, Miss Harrison. The difference is who pays them." She laughed lightly, and for a second I forgot why I was there. Back at my temporary office, I opened the folder with the internal reports. There they were, the numbers, the manipulations, the little corporate lies that sustain the Harrison empire. "Nothing's changed," I murmured. "They're still dirty. They just change perfume." I looked out the window. The city's reflection seemed to watch me back. I knew the first step had been taken, and like any good game, the enemy hadn't even realized they were already in check. That morning, the bathroom mirror reflected a stranger. The impeccable suit, the carefully styled hair, the cold face of someone who had learned to lie while looking into eyes. But beneath the disguise, Steve Cole was still there, the man who had lost everything. Sometimes I wonder if rebuilding a life is the same as pretending it never was destroyed. Entering the Harrison Financial headquarters, I noticed curious glances, whispers, suspicions. That's how power manifests, in backs that bow, in fake smiles. Emily crossed paths with me in the hallway. "Mr. Colebrook, you seem to know this building better than you should." Her gaze was provocative, almost investigative. I smiled. Maybe I've been in similar places. At that moment, something inside me wavered. Maybe it was the sound of her voice, or the reminder that my plan required coldness, and she was starting to thaw something that should have been dead. During lunch, she told me about her plans to revitalize the company's brand. She wants to show we can be better than the past. The past. She had no idea of the weight that word carried in my mouth. As she spoke, I thought about how life loves ironies. The daughter of the man who ruined my career was teaching me the meaning of starting over. When the waiter brought the coffee, I realized it wasn't just the plan at risk. It was my sanity. Back at the desk, I looked at the portrait of Robert and Emily displayed in the hallway. Father and daughter, symbols of a company that prided itself on its image. The image. Always the image. The varnish that hides the dirt. That's when I felt the weight of anonymity. The mask protected me, but it also trapped me.
The phone rang. It was Robert's assistant. "Mr. Harrison wants to dine with you to discuss future strategies." Perfect. The trap was set, and he had no idea. Before leaving, I opened my notebook and typed a quick note. Every revenge charges interest, and the payment starts today. If you've ever wanted to see someone turn the tables on those who destroyed them, you should stick around until the end of this story, because sometimes justice doesn't come from the courts, it comes from the investment table. I left the building with the cold wind cutting my face. New York at night seemed made of secrets, and I carried the most dangerous one of all. The dinner took place at an expensive restaurant, the kind of place where luxury serves to disguise rot. Robert arrived with his rehearsed smile, the same one he used when he fired me. "Mr. Colebrook, I'm glad you trusted us." I raised my glass. "Trust is an expensive word, Mr. Harrison, and I always pay cash." As he talked about strategies and investments, I observed every gesture. The way he avoided mentioning the 2018 crisis, the scandal that nearly sank the company, the same one that led to my ruin. It was like watching an actor repeating the same role, unaware that the audience had changed. Emily arrived a few minutes later, smiling. The atmosphere softened. She brought a lightness that contrasted with the weight hanging over the table. "My father told me you have bold ideas, Mr. Colebrook." I stared at her. "Boldness is just the pretty name we give revenge when it works." She laughed, not understanding how serious I was. As the dinner progressed, I noticed something I didn't expect. Robert seemed tired. Behind the arrogance, there was fear. The company was truly crumbling, and he didn't know what to do. That should have satisfied me, but somehow it didn't. When he stood to take a call, Emily and I were alone. "Do you know what I admire most about you? The fact that you look at this chaos and still see something worth saving." I swallowed hard. If she knew what I planned to destroy, she might not say that. "Not everything that looks like salvation is light, Emily," I replied. She tilted her head, confused. "And not every destruction is the end." For a second, time seemed to stop. The sound of the restaurant faded, and only that gaze remained. Curious, naive, and dangerous. That night, back at the hotel, I took off my jacket and faced the mirror again. The man reflected seemed more alive and, paradoxically, more lost. I knew I was getting too close to the only person I shouldn't feel anything for. I picked up my phone and typed a message to myself. The revenge has begun. Don't get distracted. But as the city lights flickered outside, a voice in my head whispered, "What if she's the one who destroys you in the end?" There are sounds that time doesn't erase. The click of the door closing behind me that day still echoes in my mind. "You're fired, Steve." I remember Robert's empty gaze, the heavy silence of the room, and the murmur of colleagues who didn't dare to defend me. I left with the feeling of having died standing, while the world carried on alive outside. Today, every step I climb in this building is an answer the universe owes me. Memories come back in flashes. Newspaper headlines, friends distancing themselves, blocked accounts, lawyers laughing behind my back. I was the perfect scapegoat. I had talent, results, and ambition, everything a corporation fears in an honest man. While they toasted success, I counted coins to survive. But I survived, and surviving sometimes is the first act of revenge. I remember the cold of Chicago when I made my first investment. I slept in cheap motels, ate whatever, and read reports at dawn. I turned pain into capital, resentment into strategy. When the money started coming back, I no longer knew if I wanted wealth or just the power to look my tormentors in the eye again. Now I had both, and neither seemed enough. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed the cold air coming through the window. Revenge has a smell, the same as freshly printed paper and burnt coffee, the same combination that perfumed the day of my fall. But now I wasn't the employee. I was the investor, the judge, and perhaps the executioner. The press started sniffing blood. An anonymous report, carefully leaked by me, hinted that Harrison Financial had masked losses for years. The chaos started small, like a crack in a crystal glass. One touch, and everything began to shatter. The market reacted with panic, and Robert with desperation. It was beautiful to watch. Emily sought me out that same day, distressed. "They're attacking my father, Mr. Colebrook. We need to act fast." The irony made me smile inside. "Calm down, Emily. Sometimes cracks show what needs to be rebuilt." She nodded, not understanding the double meaning. For a second, I felt guilt. A second, and nothing more. As she organized a press conference to try to contain the crisis, I discreetly fed the flames. I moved shares, manipulated rumors, and watched the company bleed under the weight of its own lies. Everything was going according to plan. But the closer I got to Robert's ruin, the more I saw myself reflected in him. That haunted me. At night, I sat by the hotel window, watching Manhattan's lights. The city doesn't sleep, it just changes masks. Just like me. I picked up my phone and opened the email titled "The Next Step." In the attachment were the old records, the transactions that would start the final fall. I took a deep breath before clicking. Now, the end begins. The company's charity event was just a facade. Champagne, speeches, and hypocrisy with a golden label. I watched from afar, smiling when necessary, measuring every word spoken by the same people who called me a criminal. And then I saw him, Thomas Reed, my old friend, the man who sold me out to save his own skin. He was there, laughing, as if the past had just been an accounting detail.
My heart raced. The lights, the clink of glasses, everything faded. There was only me and him. I walked slowly to the bar where he was chatting with investors. When our eyes met, his smile died mid-toast. "Shouldn't you be dead?" he murmured, paling. I tilted my head, calm. "No, I just learned to do business the way you taught me, by lying." The silence between us weighed more than any words. He tried to keep his composure, but the sweat betrayed his panic. "What do you want, Steve?" he whispered. "Nothing you don't owe me." I left before anyone noticed. The sound of applause in the next room seemed distant, like I was a few steps from a hell I knew well. In the car, I took a deep breath. Seeing Thomas again reopened wounds I thought had healed. It wasn't just about Robert anymore. It was about everyone who betrayed me. And no matter how hard I tried to stay rational, the hatred I'd harbored for 4 years began to overflow through the cracks in my calm. In the following days, Emily and I spent more time together. She saw me as a mentor, someone who believed in her potential, when in reality, I was just using her as a bridge. But the more time I spent by her side, the harder it was to maintain the disguise. Emily was the opposite of her father. Transparent, idealistic, too innocent for that world of wolves. And I, a wolf, disguised as a savior. One afternoon, she took me to the company-run charity fund. Children, families, real smiles. The human side I had forgotten still existed. "My father made mistakes, but I want to change that," she said, looking at me. Those words hit me like a punch. For an instant, I forgot the plan, the revenge, the hatred. All that remained was doubt. Back at the office, I tried to drown the confusion in spreadsheets and reports. The plan had to continue, and feelings were a threat. But her face kept coming back to my mind. Her kindness was a crack in the shield I'd spent years building. And the problem with cracks is that they always grow. That night I wrote in my notebook, "Revenge is simple until love enters the equation." I closed the book and looked at the illuminated city. Down below, thousands of people chased power, money, status. I'd had all that. And now I just wanted something money couldn't buy. A peaceful heart. The early morning had that dense silence that only exists on the high floors of an empty building. I opened my notebook, hacked into Harrison Financial's internal servers, and began scouring the old files. Lines of code, encrypted folders, forgotten spreadsheets, the company's digital past. And there it was, what I was looking for. The suspicious transactions from 4 years ago. My heart raced when I saw the name. Thomas Reed. He, not me, was responsible for the fraud. I kept reading, and the anger gave way to shock. The internal messages revealed something worse. Robert knew. He covered it all up to save the company's reputation, sacrificing my name as a shield.
My hands trembled. The ground seemed to spin. All the pain, the hatred, the sleepless nights, everything was born from one man's cowardice and another's betrayal. It was the proof I'd always wanted, but not the feeling I'd expected. I closed the laptop and stared at the window's reflection. New York slept, but inside me, a war was awake. Part of me wanted to blow up the Harrison Empire from within, let every lie crumble under the weight of truth. The other part, quieter and more dangerous, wanted to see Emily again and hear from her that not all Harrisons were the same. That was the part that weakened me. I saved the files to a USB drive and hid it in my jacket's inner pocket. The past was finally under my control, and yet I felt a strange emptiness, as if victory tasted like ash. "Now you'll see what it's like to lose everything," I murmured. But as I said it, I realized I was losing something too. I found Emily on the company rooftop that night. The cold wind tousled the hair, and the city below seemed to breathe in slow rhythm. She smiled when she saw me, unaware that I carried in my hands the truth that would destroy everything she loved. "Steve, or should I say Steven?" she asked suddenly, with a firm gaze. My body froze. She knew. "I looked up your real name, your transactions, your companies. You're Steve Cole, the man my father fired." Her voice held no anger, just disappointment. "Was it all a game to you?" I swallowed hard. "No. It was the only way to survive, Emily." The silence that followed was the sound of my soul breaking. She stepped back, eyes welling up.
You wanted justice, Steve, but you ended up becoming what you hated most.
I stood there, watching her disappear down the hallway. The wind brought the distant smell of rain, the same smell as the day I was fired. It was as if the universe had a taste for irony. I took the USB drive from my pocket and looked at it. The truth fit into a tiny device, but it weighed tons. That night, I sat on the apartment floor and stared at the flickering lights outside. Revenge was within reach. I could destroy Robert and Thomas with one click. But if I did, I'd destroy Emily too. The only person who reminded me I was still human. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to choose. I spent weeks compiling what I called the dossier, emails, spreadsheets, recordings, and statements, connecting Thomas to the fraudulent transactions and showing Robert covering it all up. Every file was verified, every audio clip authenticated. I discreetly hired legal counsel and a trusted journalist who agreed to publish everything at once. I didn't just want to expose, I wanted the world to watch the fall, like a movie where the lights go out on the villain. Anxiety gnawed at me, but there was a new clarity. This wasn't just revenge, it was historical correction. In my pocket, the USB drive burned like a one-way train ticket. I scheduled the General Assembly for a Thursday and timed the disclosure to coincide with the meeting. I indirectly invited skeptical shareholders, reporters, and the financial regulator's compliance team. Everything seemed orchestrated by invisible hands. Before leaving home, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my sister and told her I loved her. If I was going to lose something more, let it not be her. The feeling of hanging between right and destructive returned like a tide. The night before was one of absolute insomnia, but also a sharp peace. On the morning of the assembly, I put on my best suit and walked to the building like someone heading to a public execution. In the hall, the chairs were full, and the air conditioning vainly tried to cool the tension. When I announced I'd open the session with a statement, I noticed Robert's gaze, curious, confident, predatory. Emily was there, pale, and I knew in that instant she suspected something, and the decision I made would hit her full force. I took a deep breath and stood to speak. It wasn't just a speech, it was the delivery of proof I'd kept for years. As I spoke, projectors showed spreadsheets and messages. The room fell into absolute silence, as if even the air had stopped to listen. When I revealed my name and the truth, I felt the world shift on its axis. Some laughed, others cried, and a few tried to flee. I was ready. The confusion was immediate. Reporters rushed in, phones recorded, and shareholders demanded explanations. Thomas tried to slip out the service door. Robert sat, pale, as his aura of command unraveled before so much evidence. From my pocket, I saw the glint of a camera pointed at me. It was the moment I'd always imagined, and it hurt more than I'd anticipated. Emily stood slowly, her eyes fixed on me, as if I were a stranger who'd stolen her life. When the authorities arrived, alerted by allies I'd convinced of the document's authenticity, Thomas was detained and questioned. Robert had to give a statement before the shareholders and press, and his mask crumbled at the details of the evidence. Emily ran to me, perhaps expecting an explanation that wouldn't fit into the words I'd brought. Instead, I handed her the USB drive with the full truth, and glimpsed her face marked by shock and guilt. That afternoon, I heard that some investors wanted to sue the company. Others demanded heads roll for those who had managed it all. I was called to the stage, and for a brief second, I imagined triumphant applause. But there were boos, calls for arrest. Some still didn't understand the purpose of my actions. Losing anonymity cost me something deep, the right to be seen only as a vigilante. I'd become public, controversial, unpredictable. When everything calmed, I walked to the rooftop and looked at the city with tired eyes. Robert was removed from his position, and in the following days, Thomas signed a plea deal that put him under formal investigation. Emily avoided me for weeks. Then finally, she asked to talk. She didn't forgive right away, but she didn't hate me completely, and that in a way hurt less than I had expected. I'd won the war,
and at the same time realized victory had a price my heart wasn't ready to pay.
In the days following the assembly, New York seemed to breathe my name. Headlines, news broadcasts, economic analyses, Steve Cole, the man who toppled an empire. But the sound of victory is hollow when there's no one beside you to hear it. I walked the streets feeling like a shadow with a face. Revenge had given me fame, but taken my soul. Harrison Financial was on the brink of bankruptcy, and I on the brink of emptiness. On the morning news, I saw Robert being escorted to security to a hearing. No smile remained on the man who once dictated the fate of hundreds. I felt compassion for an instant, and that irritated me. How can someone pity their own executioner? I turned off the TV and stared at the city's reflection in the apartment windows. Every light outside seemed to ignite a memory of what I'd lost along the way. I received a message from Emily. "You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it." The words pierced more than any accusation. I typed the reply, deleted it, wrote again, and deleted once more. Nothing seemed enough. She was right. I won, and paradoxically, I felt more defeated than ever. At night, I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind was cold, almost cutting. I thought about everything I'd done, everyone I sunk with me. Revenge, I realized, is a handleless knife. To wound the other, you have to cut yourself first. I looked at the dark river below and thought that maybe, if I closed my eyes, it would give me back peace. But peace never comes from outside. It comes after the anger dies. Months later, Harrison Financial no longer existed. The building had been sold, employees reassigned, and the name erased from the stock exchanges. Robert was convicted of fraud, and Thomas signed a plea deal. The market moved on, as it always does, and I tried to do the same. I opened a small consultancy in Boston, discreet, without spotlights. Working unseen was almost a relief. From time to time, I still thought of Emily. I heard she'd taken over part of the old company, rebranded simply as Harrison Group, focused on sustainable and ethical investments. I read an interview with her in the newspaper. The mistakes of the past don't define us. What we do with them does. I smiled. She'd understood what it took me years to learn.
Money was never the prize. Truth was. But truth also charges interest. It doesn't return time, nor love, nor what pain consumes. Walking Boston streets, I noticed how the world remains indifferent to everyone's dramas. The city is impersonal, but alive. And I, for the first time, was alive too, even with the scars. One afternoon, I received an unmarked envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. The company needs someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and still stand. Are you ready to start over? At the end, just a signature, Emily Harrison. I stared at those words for long minutes, feeling a mix of relief and fear. Maybe destiny doesn't want endings, just new beginnings. I held the envelope for long minutes before opening it fully. The paper bore the minimalist logo of the new Harrison Group, gray on white, clean, without excess, as if it wanted to erase the past once and for all. Inside, a formal invitation to a meeting in New York, signed by Emily Harrison, CEO, and a single handwritten sentence: "Every reconstruction starts with someone who learned to fall." I stared at the firm handwriting and recognized in it something that never changed: hope. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in my hands. I thought about everything that city had taken from me, and everything it could still, somehow, give back. The fear wasn't of returning, but of repeating the same mistakes. Part of me wanted to refuse, erase the past, and move on. But there was another part, quieter and more stubborn, that whispered, maybe it's time to rebuild. Sometimes forgiveness is the most sophisticated revenge of all. I traveled to New York a few days later. The old Harrison Financial building looked different. New colors, new name, new people. But the windows, The windows were the same. I went up to the top floor, and when the elevator doors opened, there was Emily, standing, waiting for me. Time had made her stronger, but her eyes still had the same sparkle. "Steve Cole," she said, smiling. "Welcome back." I looked around, breathing the air that once suffocated me. "I never thought I'd set foot here again," I replied. She crossed her arms and said, "Then it's a good time to start over." I felt something inside me quiet down. Maybe revenge hadn't destroyed me. Maybe it had just prepared me to understand what really matters. I smiled and extended my hand. "Let's rebuild this together." Outside, the city pulsed alive, as if everything was starting over again.